hear the sound yet?
Say that again. I can't hear you.
You cannot hear me?
Can you hear me?
Of course I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Do you think the audience is ready?
Hopefully. You're probably more ready than I am. Welcome, everybody, to NMRAx August edition. This is Brooks Willig, your host for today, and I hail from San Angelo, Texas, and I'm in the Lone Star Division 5. Our next clinician has been a member of the NMRA, the National Railway Historical Society, and the Ontario and Western Railway Historical Society for over 50 years. He is currently serving as a board member of the Sunrise Trail Division of the NMRA and as the president of the Long Island Sunrise Trail chapter of the NRHS. He is currently a member and qualified conductor and tour guide at the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum. So everyone, please welcome Ed Pullard.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, depending on where you are. I want to thank you, the NMRA, for giving me this chance to present. And I live in New York City. The Wisconsin and Michigan Railroad Club is located in Wisconsin and Michigan, like their name suggests. So how the hell am I involved with this group? Good question. But it's also a testimony to the fellowship that can be developed within the National Model Railroad Association. Someone told me they were doing a presentation for a group called River Rail, and it was on a Thursday night Zoom session. So I joined it. This was 2023, 2024, something like that. And I liked what I saw. Came back the next week. It's now 2025, and I'm still coming back for more. It's always enjoyable. Sometimes the presentations even add to the enjoyment, but the big enjoyment for me is seeing everybody. So that's how it started. Let's continue with our presentation. Okay. This is the guidebook to the largest model train show in the United States, the 2025 edition. That's the cover. And they celebrated the 125th anniversary of Lionel and the 90th anniversary of the National Model Railroad Association on Friday, January 24th, which is setup day. They had a very nice reception. The president of the NMRA was there. Representatives from Lionel were there. And I believe the NMRA catered the affair. And snacks, drinks. It was a nice evening. And then we all went out to dinner. If you've never been to the Amherst Railroad Show, which is in Springfield, Massachusetts, the last weekend of every January, put it on your list to go. It is well worth it. And at the bottom of the 7th page of that booklet I just showed, and the last page of the exhibitors list, 5th from the bottom was the Wisconsin and Michigan Model Railroad Club, Mallory Spot 160. I will tell you this, we were located in the next to last spot before the back wall of the building, but we were there. Now, how did we get there? Well, one of the members of the Wisconsin and Michigan decided he was going to load the layout into the trailer and drive east. And originally it was only going to be he and another person. Well, because I'm in New York City and close enough, it's only 2.5 hour drive for me, I volunteered to go with him. Hey, you need someone to help you, at least bathroom break or whatever. So I volunteered. And that's how I got there. And the Wisconsin and Michigan layout arrived in style, as you can see. Very nice pickup truck and a very nice trailer. The Wisconsin and Michigan Railroad Club traveled a round-trip distance of 2,400 miles in order to appear at the Amherst Railroad Show. Quite a distance. But it wasn't the furthest they ever went. They've been in Florida, and I think they did an appearance or two in Texas. An image by Joe Lalensack, the Wisconsin and Michigan trailer is seen in the Mallory building before unloading begins. It takes just 2 people to unload the trailer thanks to a winch. We winch stuff out and we winch stuff in. Controlled up and down the ramp. The folks who assembled the layout in a little over an hour. These are the Smith brothers. They've taken up model railroading since they've discontinued the cough drops. Ed Klein, myself, Gary Odenhoven, Alan Schroeder, Tim, Dave Berman, and Joe Lalensack. And we had just finished setting up the layout on Friday. Unloaded, the engine terminal end of the layout serves as a module rack. The quarry end of the layout also serves as a module rack. And they're all on wheels. So it makes moving stuff around very easy. 2 guys can move it, although you need 4 to 6 guys to handle the sections when you slide them out. Give a little love to the utility dolly. Without this thing, we would have not gotten the layout put together. The modules assembled, and we're starting to begin the detailing on the layout. Gary Udenhoven connecting the module electrics. The layout has just been brought up to DCC standards. This was actually the first, I believe, the first or second time it was out on DCC. Gary Udenhoven talking to the standing Alan Schroeder. Now, Alan was lucky to join us. He's a farmer, and it was calving season had not yet begun at his dairy farm. That coffin to the far right is the transporter box for the buildings on the layout. Alan Schroeder installing the bridge rails between modules. Now, notice the gap. We did nothing to cover the gap. We just left it out there for everyone to see. And it was amazing as the day went on, you began not to see the gap. Everybody is making bridge rail connections. I even gave it a try, but in the time it took me to do one, Alan Schroeder and everyone else did about 5. Real men don't read instructions. This is the engine terminal area. And yes, those are a set of instructions on how to assemble the layout. Nobody read them. While Ed Klein is checking something on the layout, that's Mr. Klein right here, Dave Berman is working on the detailing. Tim is working on an electrical issue. Kent Smith is at right. The kill switch figured out, Tim goes back to getting his latest 3D model operating. Gentleman back in Wisconsin is responsible for the electrics on the layout, and he had just installed a kill switch for emergency. So you would think to put power on the layout, the kill switch should be on. Turned out the kill switch should be off. We spent 15 minutes and 3 phone calls to Wisconsin trying to figure that out. Little background here. The Burlington Northern Santa Fe had a concern about the loss of taconite pellets blowing out of ore jennies as the trains moved at speed. Remember, loss of weight means loss of revenue. As an experiment, they built covers for over 200 of the ore jennies. A crane would lift the cover into place at the loading site. During the initial run of the train, one of the covers, improperly secured, came off. It derailed the rest of the train, reducing it to scrap. Only 81 of the original converted cars survived. Starting near Christmas 2024, Tim decided to model the surviving cars using 3D modeling. The 81 cars were 3 types, but Tim had the official drawings for each of them. The cars were all painted. Over 2,500 decals were used in the lettering of them. Each car is numbered from one of the survivors. Only the wheel sets and couplers were purchased. Many of the cars have 3D drawbars that resemble couplers in order to keep the costs down. You know how expensive Cadies can get. The train premiered to the public at the 2025 Amherst Railroad Show. And here we are, the covered taconite hopper train, 4 units on the head end of the train. And of course, they're BNSF units. The covered taconite hopper train, cars behind the locomotives. The covered taconite hopper train, middle of the train as it's going by. And here we are looking forward over the curve with the taconite train covered hoppers there. The covered taconite hopper train, rear of the train with a shoving platform. And it's going by the gravel pit loading area here. Now this is my bad. 3 days I'm living with this layout and we're playing with this train, and I didn't get a picture of one of the ore cars. So I just lifted this from one of my other pictures, but it's a little blurry, so I apologize. The modeling is superb. The photographer is in the, well, you can figure out where. The proud pop of the taconite covered hopper train. He's still looking to improve it. In fact, when he got back to Wisconsin, he started a project on making new trucks for the 81 cars. Then he said, I might make an extra 50 or so cars to go along with it. Passengers on our model layout were accommodated by the Chicago North Shore Milwaukee Electroliner. Here it is coming at you. And again, there's the gap between two modules, and we did nothing really to hide the gap. And here he is at speed coming around one of the curves and passing the covered taconite hopper train. Basically, it's a 3-track oval layout with a fiddle yard in between, in the middle. Here's the rear end of the electroliner. Of course, the rear end looks just like the front end. The second section of the electroliner represented by the Wisbeck and Upwell tram train. Now, one of us in our group is a armchair British outline modeler, and I'll be honest, when this thing was offered, I couldn't help but buy it. It's such a cute little train. The owner of the Wisbeck and Upwell tram train. The Wisconsin and Michigan Model Railroad Club was formed on April 9, 1987, with 16 members from the area. Since that time, the club has grown to about 30 active members from the local area of Marionette, Wisconsin, and Menominee, Michigan. We also have members nationwide and one in Canada. I'm part of the nationwide section there. The Wisconsin and Michigan Railroad Club normally takes part in several annual railroad shows in the upper Midwest area, including the Stevens Point Arctic Run, which is in January, February, Madison Mad City, February, La Crosse Three Rivers in March, Green Bay Titletown, April, and many other train shows throughout Wisconsin. The layout has also appeared at numerous national train shows. The club owns the 40-foot by 10-foot HO scale traveling layout and the trailer that it travels in. The rolling stock, engine, and cars operated and displayed on the layout are owned by the individual members, and it's pretty much the rule of thumb for any of these display layouts you see at train shows. Kent Smith left and Ed Klein at the engine terminal end of the layout while the show was open. Kent Smith used to have a hobby store up in Wisconsin. It's long gone. The passenger station side of the layout while the show was open. Although it's early in the day, we usually had more people than that walking around the layout. The passenger station, the Wisbeck and Upwell tram, the Chicago North Shore and Milwaukee Electroliner, and some cars from the circus train. Speaking of the circus train, here's Gary Odenhoven's Cole Brothers Circus train standing in the yard on the layout, the external yard on the layout. If you look at the upper left of the picture, that's the internal fiddle yard where those cars are. The stock cars in the Cole Brothers Circus train. And of course, we've got the zebra detail in the door of the second stock car. Detail of a Cole Brothers Circus train flat car. And there are numerous cars in this train with similar wagons all set to go. It's really a beautiful work of art. And when you see it running, it's even more special. And here's a view of the rear of the Cole Brothers Circus train. Yes, the flat cars, like typical circus trains, are longer, and they accommodate four circus wagons each, or normal length circus wagons. The Milwaukee Roads Morning Hiawatha, courtesy of Kent Smith. And we had fun with this train because we had a choice of two locomotives. We either had the pair of E8s, as you see there, or we had a Milwaukee Road 484 to power it. Both would have been prototypical to the consist in the train. Santa Fe Streamliner, standing in the yard next to an Algoma Central freight. And the Streamliner is very close to being out of the box as the Wisbeck and Upwell tram was. Iconics came by, and they were looking for press. So as long as we had a little sign that told people this, they gifted us 2 intercity buses. This is the more interesting of the two seen on the layout. And again, the taconite covered hopper train is in the background. The scavenger hunt. The show committee would later comment on how the scavenger hunt we offered and the roving ambassadors talking to viewers were very good things in their opinion. What we did to anyone who was interested, we gave them this yellow card, and we also gave them a pencil. They got to check out as many as they saw. And at the end of their search, they turned in the card. It was examined. Ha ha ha. And we would always present. We had a whole ceremony worked out where we presented the person who was submitting the card with a sticker as an award for getting everything done. It was a lot of fun. The guy who did the presentation took it serious. I mean, he was more serious than the Academy Award presenter. So we had a lot of fun with that. And then Gary and I continually walked around the outside of the layout to talk with people, gave them the cards for the scavenger hunt, and answered their questions. It takes people. Yes, any model railroad exhibit takes people. Dan Smith on the left and Gary Udenhoven resting their legs. Cement floors in Springfield are killers. They really are. Dave Berman left and Alan Schroeder in the pit. Dave runs a wonderful Zoom-based session for River Rail every Thursday evening. Wonderful man. Joe Lalensack hiding behind the grain elevator. Joe, you look too serious. You're supposed to be having fun. And you can see some of the people looking at the layout behind us. That guy from New York City and Gary Udenhoven. Okay, this was something I put together for a reason that doesn't need to be mentioned now, but Tim is a master 3D print modeler, as you could have seen from the taconite hopper train. And he's meeting, and I introduced him to Malcolm Houck, an MMR, who lives in Massachusetts and is an acquaintance of mine. He's a traditional scratch builder, fantastic scratch builder, actually. He's virtually building the entire roster of the New York, Ontario, and Western Railroad. And then I'm over there to the right. In the pit, Ed Klein, Tim, and in the back, Alan Schroeder. They're busy talking to someone who's asking some questions. And that's the diesel shop area on the layout in front of them. Mr. Thursday night, Dave Berman, who does his thing. And Mr. Wednesday night, that's me, although I recently, after 5 years, gave up my Wednesday night weekly Wednesday night presentations for the Sunrise Trail Division. They'll be back under new managership in the next few weeks. Ed Klein looking very serious. Ed Klein always looks serious. Nice man. Wait a minute, what's that happening over his shoulder? Maggie the Clown discussing things with Gary Udenhoven. Now, Gary wouldn't tell us what he was talking about. So a couple of us got speculating that Maggie was asking Gary if Dave Berman was single. But we won't go into that. John Sacerdote, perhaps you've heard the name. The show director came around and visited us on Sunday morning. He basically asked us, could you get all our people together? And I'll be back in a moment. The thought was, what did we do wrong? And we were beginning to say, well, I guess we're going to have to dismantle the layout and bring it back to Wisconsin early. We were wrong. Actually, John Sacerdote had a blue ribbon and a plaque for us. And just to make sure you know who's on first, Alan Schroeder, Ed Klein, Dave Berman, Tim, Joe Lalensack. Somehow I got front and center, which I really didn't deserve. There's John Sacerdote, the show director. And over here we got Gary Udenhoven holding up the plaque. There you go. Best in Show Layout 2025. We were blown away. You can't believe how we were in disbelief that this had happened to us. Way larger layouts. I mean, there was a G-scale layout that had like a half mile of track, real half mile of track there. There was a huge Northeast Corridor layout and a bunch of others. It was unbelievable, but yet somehow they chose us. And I thank the committee and whoever chose. We all thank them. Ron Pelletier, who's from the Nutmeg Division. I believe he's the president of the Nutmeg Division. He's also the show manager in training, delivering AccuRail boxcar kits for the Amherst belt lines for the folks who achieved the best in show layout. Yes, the 9 of us who worked on the layout, each one of us got a AccuRail kit with a boxcar labeled for the Amherst belt lines. Dan and Ken Smith got their boxcars, but they were shopping at the time of the presentation, so that's the only reason they're not in the picture. And I apologize to them. ABEL 2025-25, one of the AccuRail boxcars presented to the group. This is the one that I got. And pictures on my dining room table. A picture was taken on my dining room table. Now, I made 2 changes from the basic kit. I put metal wheels on, and I put genuine KD couplers on. Looks nice, rolls nice. Now, if I only had a layout to run it on, we should take note of the total attendance at the Amherst Railroad Show for 2025. 27,535 people. That's a new record. 27,535 people interested in model trains. Now the question is, how many of them are National Model Railroad Association members? How many of them actually know about the National Model Railroad Association? Yes, we had a booth there from the Northeast region, but there's 4 buildings, and there are people who only go in some of the buildings and don't go to all 4. The show closed at 4 p.m. on Sunday evening. The W&M was loaded and ready to go by 5:15 p.m. That's right. We got everything loaded and ready to go in an hour and 15 minutes. And we weren't even trying to go fast. But we were able to achieve it. And, this is a layout that's designed for portability, designed to be easy to be packed, and easy to be moved. I want to thank Dave Berman, Ed Klein, Joe Lalensack, Gary Odenhoven, Tim, Alan Schroeder, Dan Smith, and Kent Smith, all who made the trip from Wisconsin or Michigan to appear at the 2025 Amherst Railroad Show. And then there was this guy. Well, that's my badge at the show. Tell you a funny story. Like I said, I ran a weekly series for the Sunrise Trail Division and ran this same presentation for them back in February, I believe it was. Somebody looked at the badge and said, "Ed, you've moved to Plover, Wisconsin. I'm sorry, but we're going to have to throw you out of the division. Or rather, the NMRA will move you out of the division." Well, Wisconsin, it's basically the good Amherst folks use the dress of the Model Railroad Club for all of our badges. Okay, photographs without a title surround and text copyright 2025 by me. Ownership of the photographs with a title surround remain with their photographers as noted. And I want to thank Gary Udenhoven and Tim for the additional photographs. And I walked away with a great respect for these people who I'd previously only had a electronic contact with. I now had personal contact with. And Tim pulled off a stunt that amazed me. 5:15 Tim and I were both at the Model Railroad layout at 7 o'clock in the morning. He was ready to go home. He got in his car at 5:30 on Sunday night and drove back to Wisconsin, and he got there 20 hours later. He did say he stopped once or twice to take a nap and for a couple of and for some food, but that's the feat that blew my mind. The other thing is we did have some trouble with the trailer. We had a tire blow in the Chicago area on the way east, and on the way west, a bearing went bad on the trailer. But all in all, it was a good time, and 3 of the people who were at the event said they would come back on their own, whether or not the Wisconsin and Michigan layout would be active at the exhibit in January 2026. So I guess that's it. If anyone has any questions or anything, I'm here, ready and waiting. So, Brooks, I'm going to. Unfortunately, it's a little early, but I'm going to turn it back to you.
It's all right. We got a few questions from the chat, and then I've made a list myself, and Speed has too. So we'll have plenty to talk about. But one of the things I was wondering is, how did you get in contact with these guys and invited to come help them with this layout?
Well, as I said, I was attending a Zoom meeting with them regularly, and one day, no, I think it was late October, early November 2024, Gary Udenhoven says he wants to take the layout to Springfield. And he had already sent in a letter to the Springfield folks to see if he could get space, knowing it was a little late. He didn't think he was going to get it. And at that time, he had only 2 people. And I knew you need more than 2 people to run a model railroad layout exhibit. So I said, I live in New York. I'm 2.5 hours away. I'll come up. I'll work with you for the weekend. And then gradually other members of the Wisconsin and Michigan decided to work. Actually, there was, besides the pickup car and the pickup truck and the trailer, there were 2 additional automobiles, and 3 guys rented a van from one of the rental companies, and they came east in that. The highlight, though, was the socialization that we had, and we all went out to dinner at the Steaming Tender in Massachusetts, which, if you go to Springfield and you exhibit at Springfield, that's where you go to dinner on Saturday night.
So how many shows do they take this layout to? Or is this kind of one of the first ones out of this far that they've gone to?
This is not the furthest they've gone to. They've actually exhibited in Florida.
Okay. Wow.
Which is a longer distance. But they do, as far as the long distance shows like this, they do maybe 1, 2 a year. Other than that, they're very active in the local area, and probably 12 a year.
Is there any criterias for figuring out which shows they go to?
It's basically they sit together and says, who's going to pull the trailer to the show?
So does the layout set up the same way every time, or do they change configuration of it?
It's a set oval layout. There's no possibility for modification, for doing the layout different. Although the discussion was, after Springfield, they were thinking about retiring one of the sections and rebuilding it. So, but it would still be the all, 2 end caps and 2 sides.
What's the minimum radius on the layout? What's kind of the size limit of equipment that you can run on it?
I don't know the number for sure. That it appeared to be about 36 inches. Okay. We were running everything. We were running 80-foot circus train flat cars, 80-foot passenger cars, Milwaukee Road 484. No problems.
Cool. So, like the switches in there, I guess they're probably number 6s, number 8s, some pretty big switches for that.
They're big. They're big switches. I really didn't get a picture of. There's just basically one set of crossovers and then a lead into the roundhouse area.
Cool.
But yeah, it's the big thing about this layout: cleaning. We were constantly cleaning the layout, and I went through I don't know how many bottles of denatured alcohol cleaning the rail, but that's the trick to keeping it smoothly running. Uh, Springfield has a concrete floor. Springfield, where we were, we were in the building that they use for the animal exhibits. It's clean, it doesn't smell, but there's dust. And with all that foot traffic, it kicks the dust up. So you're constantly cleaning the rails.
Right.
It's what you got to do. Although we're looking at, we did take a look at a rail cleaning car that we might put into service, and then someone else came up with the idea of modeling one of the rail grinding trains, only doing it as only instead of having the 3 rail grinder cars, have 3 rail cleaning cars with the pads underneath. Interesting idea.
That would probably take a lot of the cleaning time. Just run that with the with the train going around. So
Plus, it's an unusual type of piece of equipment. And if you do the 2nd generation rail grinder trains, other than the locomotives where you got a model where you got to do a little kit bashing around the cab, it's just painting stuff. It's very, it shocked when we started looking at it and this was with the Secretary of the Northeast Region, Jeff Paston. When he started throwing this out, it's like it was easier than one would think. The current generation trains, those would be a little more complicated,
right.
but we can get around with the older generation stuff.
Cool. When y'all set the modules up, and you talked about the little pieces of rail in between, do you have to cut those for every spot, or is it pretty consistent between the modules? You can just have a set to plug in.
The point is that you make things consistent. That way, all you got to do is have a box of connectors, and you can pick any one out of the box.
Okay.
So maybe connectors between us on the freight yard side on one exhibit, and the next side the connectors over by the passenger station on the following one. Standardization, make it as easy as possible. Nothing. Keep the switches away from the ends. Now, again, as you saw in the pictures of the modules, these are long modules. These are not your 6 or 4 foot modules that you often see in HO exhibits. These are 20. These are I think they were 18 feet long, if memory serves correct. And like I said, it took 6 guys to handle it. Everything is pre-wired. Yeah, Gary had to go underneath, but he was just plugging stuff together.
I saw that y'all had those modules on carts rolling out of the trailer. I thought that was a pretty cool idea, the way those were built.
What you don't see is that those carts come out of the trailer. They are hooked to a winch, so they're actually the winch slows down the loading or the unloading, and then speeds up the loading. So all you're doing is directing it. You're not doing the actual weight of moving the module. As I said, 2 guys can handle the loading and unloading of the modules. It's only when you start sliding the modules out of the rack that you need more warm bodies.
Letting gravity do the work there.
Absolutely.
That's cool.
And one of the jokes was we tell that we use a winch to load, because the questions came up at the show. We use a winch to load and unload the trailer. We used to use a winch, but she got expensive to keep. Sorry, guys. I hope I'm not offending anyone's sensibility.
Oh man. Well, the ore cars that you had on the layout, are those 3D printed too?
Yes.
The whole thing. I know you mentioned the couplers. That was pretty neat too.
Yeah. In other words, the cars were set up in units of 3 cars, and with a drawbar between them. That the drawbar looked like it was like a cross between a knuckle coupler and a KD coupler, and it's just a way of saving money.
Hmm.
And frankly, this thing ran as a unit train, and it was like I think 210 cars when it was originally built.
Wow.
Or Jennies, they're short; they run long cars, long trains.
Yeah.
And the thing happened that it got, it didn't work in real life. So, but Tim was fascinated with the story. He had the plans, and he's a fantastic 3D modeler.
Hmm.
He's been working on a model of a Great Lakes car ferry for a number of years.
Oh, cool. I think we had Tim on an NMRAx show a couple years ago that I hosted, and yeah, fascinating to talk to with 3D printing.
Absolutely.
Do you think you'd be willing to sell the cars or the file for that, or?
Yeah, like he says he's not someone who's a merchant. Doesn't sell stuff. He makes the models. Sometimes for friends he will do stuff. Sometimes for associates he will do stuff. But I think for the most part he's modeling for himself. I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to quote and make any statements. I'm not going to put any words in his mouth.
Right. Well, those who decides to run the trains on the layout? You said that they all bring their own.
We all brought our own, and we have a death cage match in the morning before we start, and the survivors get to run. it's we just sort of look at each other and decide. Basically, my was specking up well. Tram was sitting by the passenger station every day, and then from like 2:00 on, I had a chance to run it. Just it's everybody gets a chance to participate. Who brings the rolling stock gets a chance to participate. A couple of guys didn't bring rolling stock. They got to run and do stuff, but it's always good.
So the locomotives, did those get brought to you by guys that were running the layout?
Everyone brings complete. Everyone brings complete trains.
Do y'all have to do any programming on those to make them all work together on the layout? If
they've all been pre-programmed so they're to work together. So they just drop in.
Good.
It's be prepared, get everything set up. The layout does have a programming track built into it. There's a number of features in that layout. That there's a repair desk. There's a toolbox built into the layout. But the idea is they're there for emergencies, and be prepared, get everything ready. Steel wheels, good couplers, and in other words, if you're going to run your favorite train on your layout, on a traveling layout like this, go down on your layout a couple of days before and run it for a couple hours straight. Just watch how it behaves. The old Boy Scout thing. I know we don't associate with them anymore. Be prepared.
Yeah.
It's a good.
Right.
It's a good mantra. Have your stuff ready. Have it lubricated. If it's a multi-day show, be prepared that night in your motel room to lubricate everything and serve locomotives, particularly in service.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll work.
So the engines that are in the diesel shop, are they just parked there, or do they get the chance to run?
They got rotated out to run. All the locomotives that were displayed on that layout were operative. They didn't necessarily all operate, but they were all capable of operating. We had the Santa Fe Streamliner running around. We had the Algoma Central Freight running around. We had the circus train running around. You know, you have to vary things because you're doing a show, you're entertaining, so you got to vary what's there,
Right.
To keep the interest. And in fact, when you make the changes, don't do the changes out front. Have at least one track that goes in behind the scenery that you can access, and you can change your trains there. Whether it's a locomotive change, whether you take a passenger train off and put a freight on, do it sort of out of the sight of the people who are in attendance. Because our layouts are basically circle pits, people will see some of it looking across. But, you do what you can.
That reminds me, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about theatrical mantra, or not mantra, but just thinking in theatrical, the way a theater works, and you got staging that comes on and off, and so yeah, doing the trains behind, in a little setting right there, then you're introducing the theatrical element to that layout. So you put the train together and then let it run out, and for the audience to see that way. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The North Shore Electroliner and the tram train, we kept them in the station all day. We had enough tracks, and then later in the day, we'd start to move them out of the station.
Cool.
What we didn't do was make any announcements or anything. We just did it.
Yeah. Okay.
And like I said, everything was DCC controlled, and most of us were running trains from our cell phones, either from the pit or walking around the outside.
Nice. That scavenger hunt that y'all were doing, that's a pretty cool thing. How many people did y'all have complete it or participate in that? And what was the age group?
Well, we had 50 awards before we started, and we ran out. We had all ages. We really had all ages, from 6, 7, 8 years old until some senior citizens. Everyone gave it a try. What often happened is with some of the younger ones, the parents started to do it with their kids.
Cool.
So, but again, in one of the comments from Sacerdote, he said it was a wonderful way to get interaction. Having we called them roving ambassadors. Basically, it was me and Gary walking around talking to people, and it was basically we interfaced with our audience. We were interactive with the audience. So many of us are at a train show, and the guys are huddled around the control stand or in a couple of chairs in the middle of the pit, and they don't say anything. They don't do anything. We shocked everyone by being out there talking with people.
And that's how you get people interested in it too. So being friendly.
Yeah. Now I will say our position was probably, as I said, I mentioned it early in the beginning of the presentation. Our position was not the best. We were in the Mallory building, which is the furthest from the entrance, and we were all the way in the back of the Mallory building, which we were probably 3/4 of a mile from the ticket window, if you will. So we didn't get the traffic that some of the other areas get, but in fact, in previous years they hadn't used this exhibit area. they just decided this year to bring in a lot more layouts and let us have at it.
Cool. Well, we're come to the end of our time. We appreciate you presenting that to us, and it's a great insight on that and everything you did during that show. So
Thank you. Speed has already invited me to come back in October. He knows I'm a working volunteer at the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum, so I'll be doing a little presentation on the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum at that time.
nice. Well, we look forward to it.
Thank
Well,
you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight.
You're welcome. And everybody, before we sign off, I just want to remind everybody to go to the breakout sessions. So the website address is, oh, I'm sorry, there's no breakout session. I'm just doing what's on the sheet here. So, well, stay tuned. We'll be back with our next clinician in 5 minutes.
Have a good one, sir. Speed, have a good one too.
Welcome, everybody, to NMRAx August edition of 2025. I'm Brooks Willig, your host for today. Come from San Angelo, Texas, of Division 5 of the Lone Star region. And I want to welcome our next presenter. He's been involved with trains for more than 65 years. Real trains and model railroad trains are of all interest to him. He likes to model the Great Northern Railway in the 1950s as they moved produce from Washington east to the Midwest. He also wants to interchange with all the railroads that have tracks that cross with the Great Northern Railway. His long work career has been involved in emergency response, hazardous materials, and tank cars for years. Training emergency responders and model railroaders has brought lots of teaching time and discussion about tank cars. For years, he has watched and photographed tank cars along with purchasing HO scale tank cars for emergency response training scenarios. He has been watching the manufacturers producing tank cars for model railroaders and their layouts, and the tank car industry and its production of tank cars change due to tank car failures involving hazardous materials incidents at derailments. He's been teaching classes across and clinics across North America for years. So today, Rich wants to share some information with other people in model railroaders about current situations involving rule changes about tank cars and transportation of flammable liquids in tank cars and 2025 in the future. This could be important for new people entering the hobby that want to model and the current transportation of flammable liquids, or people that want to start to model current railroad practices with tank cars and transportation of flammable liquids. And things change, so we got to keep up with the times. Please welcome NCR President Rich Mahaney.
Thank you. Are we ready to roll?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so as the slide says there, fast rules, modeling tank cars from 2025 and on. That's what we're going to talk about. Oops. To start with, I just want to hit a few topics to kind of provide some background information for you. The first one will be a look at hazard classes as we use them throughout the world. And then placards, a little bit about the Emergency Response Guidebook and the 4-digit numbers that are involved with the placards. A little bit about flammable and combustible liquids. What's the difference? Because that's important related to these tank cars. We'll look at the tank car classes between us and Canada, which are all the same. The FAST Act, which occurred in 2015 because of a lot of problems that were occurring across the North America with tank cars with crude oil and ethanol, and then a definition of a high hazard flammable train and how that's working with this whole process. So just some background information for you. Don't expect you to memorize it all. There's no test on it tonight, just to be familiar with some things. Across the world, we use 9 classes of all of our hazardous materials, and you can see the list there on the screen. The one that we're most interested in tonight is the class 3, liquids that burn. But the other ones are all there, and we use them across the world. So when I lived and worked in Saudi Arabia, I was dealing with the same hazard classes as I would up in Canada or in the US or in other countries. Now, down at the bottom there, it says, we call these things hazardous materials in the United States. The rest of the world calls them dangerous goods. So if you cross over to Canada, they don't talk about hazardous materials. They talk about dangerous goods. If you have a derailment, then they're going to have their dangerous goods officers show up, and it'll say that on their clothing. So there is a difference, hazardous materials versus dangerous goods. Every other country in the world calls them dangerous goods except for us in the US. So when you look at the placards for the 9 hazard classes, you look at the bottom corner, you can see the number there, number 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth, to get you oriented to the placard that goes with those different hazard classes. I did put one in there up on the top in the right there, 105, green versus white. That is one difference in placards that we have between us and Canada. In green, we talk about anhydrous ammonia being a non-flammable gas, which is not true. It is flammable, it is dangerous, it is poisonous and corrosive. And so Canada and the rest of the world use 1005 in the white placard instead of the green Hopefully someday we'll get the U.S. DOT to change over and use that, because there are a lot more hazards with anhydrous ammonia than them showing us as being a non-flammable gas. So you can see those down there, the 9 classes, and then the dangerous one, which shows you have a mixed load. And then there's a picture in the bottom corner that shows you several placards that are on a intermodal container. The one with the numbers is the primary placard or primary hazard. So, all right. So we use an emergency response guidebook in both the U.S. and Canada. We each had our own a number of years ago, and then they adopted let's make it one book. And Canada had some really good stuff that our book didn't have in it, and so that was added in. But the most current edition is 2024, and that is out now, and there'll be another edition in 2028 as far as that situation. So when you look at the placards to the left there on the screen, 1170, 1987, 3475, those all have to do with ethanol. 1170 is pure ethanol. 1987 is denatured alcohol, which is we have 3 to 5% gasoline added to it in transportation. And 3475 is ethanol with more than 10% there's gasoline with more than 10% ethanol in it. So what would I do with those numbers? I turn to the orange book there and I'd look them up, and it could tell me what those products were if you didn't know. So 1170 is the pure stuff used in making alcohol. 1987 is denatured, what we use in our automobiles. 3475 is a Canadian or a California thing that came about when they started adding more ethanol to the gasoline. So it's more than 10% ethanol. So when we look at flammable liquids, which is related to where we're going with these tank cars, flammable liquids under NFPA, we have a definition of a flash point below 100 degrees. At what temperature does it ignite at? But DOT says that same thing for flammable liquids is 141 degrees. So we have 2 different definitions in North America for the same thing, 100 versus 141. 141 is in transportation, 100 is in fixed site storage and use, like industry. Combustible liquids have the same situation where it's above 100 degrees or above 141. So again, we have a difference there between DOT and NFPA. And they asked NFPA years ago if they would change and adopt DOT's specifications. They said, nope, we're going to have 2 different ones in this country. So if you have a industry, you're using the 100 degrees. If you're out in transportation, the change point's at 141. So as we said, internationally, we use the same hazard classes throughout the world, but flammable liquids and combustible liquids are class 3 in that grouping. So important. Now, when we look at tank cars, the most common tank cars across North America, and when I use the word Canada, you would have these things that say TC ahead of them instead of DOT. So we'd have a TC 111 or a DOT 111, depending on whether it's a Canadian tank car or an American-built tank car. So I'm not going to use the TC here, but just know that that's what it means. So if we go down, we have low pressure or general service cars. That's the first grouping, which is what we're really going to focus on. And we have a DOT 111 and an AR 211, which are almost similar, a little different specifications. I'll show you pictures of these in a minute. As the DOT 111 wasn't working well in flammable liquid service for ethanol and crude oil, we came up with a new version of it called the CPC 1232, which is supposed to be stronger and things for the derailments. It didn't work out very well, but it continued to be in place here. DOT 115 is another car we're not going to talk about. And so as we replace the legacy cars, the DOT 111s and 111 CPC 1232, we came up with a new standard for the DOT 117, and that to be the safer car for transporting flammable and combustible liquids in North America. At that time, there were certainly a lot of 111s and CPC 1232 tank cars. What do you do with all of them? Well, they came out and said, you know what, if you want to retrofit them and make them like the 117, you can do that. So there's the 117R and then there's 117P. I've yet to see a P on one of these cars in the specifications. There's a possibility I saw one, but I cannot find a picture of it in my collection. So the R is for retrofit. The P is for performance base, meaning it meets the standards of a 117R or 117 car. High pressure cars are what we use for anhydrous ammonia, LP gas, chlorine, all those kind of things. So again, there's the 4 most common ones there. 112s are the LP gas 105s are the strongest tank cars we have in the business for chlorines, but they also came out with a new one for the flammable liquids that we've had, a DOT 120. And there are not a lot of those cars out being made. You can look it up on the internet, a 120, to see the specifications. Basically, it's a pressure tank car that holds low pressure liquids. And so it's a better package. And then cryogenic tank cars, we're not going to talk about those today, but they just deal with very, very cold products. So now where you can get more information on this, you can go to the internet and look up the field guide to tank cars, and that's downloadable off the internet. You can save it as a favorite, or you can buy the book. It's an excellent source of information on tank cars, and they're in the 4th edition at this point in time. So, okay, so where did this go? We've got all that basic information there. We've had some bad history over the years with crude oil and ethanol after the Bakken crude business became a big deal in North America, up in the North Dakota area. So there's been a lot of train derailments with crude and with ethanol. The one to the left is in Illinois. The one to the right is a Nebraska situation with BNSF. But in many cases, these cars have come apart, opened up, and spread their contents out, caught on fire from whatever the source might have been. So again, we see these cars in the same trains. We see them side by side in unit trains and things, but they have had some bad experiences, which led us to start looking at a lot of these things in the modern railroad world. The biggest event was up in Canada on June 7th, 2013. There were 47 people who died in this incident. There's only been about 51 people who died in the crude oil ethanol incidents, and most of them all occurred in this one incident up in Canada. I had a chance to drive through the little town 2 years ago on my way to teach up in Canada, and it all looks different than what it did that night, but that's the next day after the fire and the fires were put out. You can see all those tank cars there. It was a train that came back downhill because the brakes failed and came into this town late in the evening and opened up. And most of the people were in a big bar that was near the tracks and stuff. But real bad situation. Again, it was one of those things that said, we got to do something about these tank cars and to make changes. There's another picture of them. So, all right, so what happened? Well, that was in 2013. So they began looking at the rules, and in 2015 they came out with a thing called the FAST Act, Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act. And this is when the DOT and the pipeline folks and everybody else said we got to do something. So they made a decision that in the next 10 years, all tank cars would be replaced with DOT 117 cars or 117R cars or the P car if they're transporting flammable liquids. So that was the big thing. And they began a phase out and all these rules to start building the new cars. So when we look at that, here's just a slide that talks about that information. And you can look this up on the internet and find out all about it and what was happening. But the big thing is we needed to fix this problem in the real world. So these were the rules. And basically you can see that as of the spring, these tank cars were out of use for flammable liquids, the DOT 111s and the CPC 1232s, meaning that you could use them for other things in industry, but you couldn't use them for flammable liquids, and especially not for crude and ethanol. So as of May 25 this spring, those cars are out of service as far as our situation. And there's other rules coming for 2029 that says there's other flammable liquids can't be in them after that. So there's another part here, high hazard flammable train. This is a new rule that came out. It's all this through all this stuff with the cars that talks about how many cars could be in a train that would classify it as a high hazard flammable train. And there's a couple different definitions, and they have one also for unit trains that's down at the bottom there. The other parts of these is that they can't go through big cities unless they're going slow. Can we route them around cities? All these kind of things. So we don't have some of these disasters that we've had in the years before, like up in Canada. So again, as we look at these cars and the situation, the real railroads are doing wonderful. And they've got plenty of cars out there. They're continuing to build them. and that type of thing. But what about the model builders? If you go to the train shows, if you come to Novi this summer and you looked at the displays at the train show on the weekend, you could ask those manufacturers, what do you have? And I have been involved with that ever since the Kansas City NMRA convention. We'll come back to that in a second. I just want you to also to know something about the lettering here. When they talk about the letter DOT spec 117 car, then there are 5 letters that can be after that. Normally it could start out with an A, which was just a spacer, or it meant shelf couplers. Well, all tank cars have shelf couplers, so that doesn't really mean anything other than, hey, it's got shelf couplers, but all tank cars have. Then they may change it to an S, which said it had full head shields, and you got no credit if you had a half a head shield. So I'll show you some pictures in a second. So if you wanted to have a S there, you had to have a full head shield and, of course, shelf couplers. There was a T that was used in the high pressure cars because they used spray-on insulation, a flammable type of insulation to protect the cars and where there's flame impingement. Once in a great while, you'll see one of those on a pressure car, a DOT 112, but most of that's gone because it just didn't stay on the car very well. Then the J, like you see here, J means jacketed tank, fire resistant insulation under the jacket, and the tank car has full head shields, and of course it has shelf couplers because all tank cars have shelf couplers. And then the P means performance based, and it meets DOT 117 standards. Like I said, I may have seen one P in my lifetime on a car. And if I did, I took a picture, but I can't find the picture now. So not something regularly seen. Okay, so let's look at some pictures. So here's the DOT 111 low pressure tank car. And you can see there's no head shields on the end. It's not built in. And if we could read the spec, it would say DOT 111 A, and then there'd be some additional numbers there. And this was in ethanol service based on the Blackguard 1987. All right. Again, they come in, the 111s came in all different sizes and capacities. There's just a variety of pictures of them. The other thing to look at here is how do we know they're low pressure? If there's more than one thing sticking out of the top of the tank car, then it's low pressure. So these all are typically with 4 things on top, and that would be low pressure versus a pressure car would only have one item on top. So here's another example. It's a low pressure car, but it almost looks like a high pressure car in the shape and situation. So you got to be really careful. As an emergency responder, my first look is always at the top of the car. How many things do I see coming out of the top of the car? 1. And if it's more than 1, then it's a low pressure car. If there's only 1, then it's a high pressure car. And here's the low pressure with corrosives. And all I want you to see here is at the top, you'll see that the valves and fittings are now contained in a protective housing on corrosive cars, sulfuric acids, sodium hydroxide, a variety of different things. Okay, so here's another corrosive car, and all those valves and fittings that used to stick up on top for corrosive cars are now in a protective housing. So it might look like there's only one thing up there, but there actually is. There's going to be some sort of a pressure relief device up there also. So got to be careful. I always look at the top first, see what's up there. Then I go to the right side, look at the specifications, and then I go to the bottom to see if there's a bottom outlet. Pressure cars don't have bottom outlets. So, all right, here's a multi-compartment, 4 tanks, 4 compartments in the tank car. I've seen as many as 5 in my travels, but certainly something different. Yeah, you do see a fair number of 2-compartment tank cars. All right, so here's this DOT 111 CPC 1232. I told you that was the next step up from the just 111s, and where they started to look at some features to improve the safety of it. You can see in the side picture there's protective heads, tank heads on the ends of the tank car, but they only go halfway up. The idea was to protect against coupler puncturing, but you don't get credit for a head shield if it's only half a head shield. And so I was working with one of the manufacturers, and we were having a discussion, why do you have an A versus an S in your specifications on your model? And they looked, and I looked, and looked it up, and came back that, well, it's only a half head shield. That's why you're not getting credit for a head shield on your tank car. So if it's a full head shield, then you will get an S in that box. Here's another low pressure tank car with a 1232. You can see the head shield or half head shield on the end. And so the manufacturers made a lot of 111s, and they made a lot of 111 1232 tank cars out there for modelers. And that's all well and good, except that the rules have changed now and what can be transported and that kind of thing. So here's a 211 tank car. AR 211s are very similar to DOT 111s. There's some different, just a few things that are different in the specifications, but they look fairly similar. And again, if you look at it on the top, you can see 3 things on top there, which would make it low pressure. So along comes the 117s, and there's a lot on the internet you can find about the 117 cars, the specifications, the changes, things like that. So let's look at a couple things here in real pictures. This is a 117 car down in Texas, and as we look at it, you can see all the protective features. That the head shields are enclosed in it. All the valves and fittings are now in a protective closing up on top, or housing up on top. There's a manway up there so they can get access to the product, and it would have a bottom outlet. So when we look at the specifications, you can see the DOT 117J. Again, what does the J stand for? It means it has shelf couplers. It has head shields, full head shields. It has insulation underneath the jacket for fire resistance if it has flame impingement. And then J means it has a jacket around the actual tank. And then you can go down there to see the pressure relief device valve is designed to operate at 75 psi when it would open. The one up there on the top where it says DOT 117J, the 100 is the tank test pressure, and then there's a W1, that's about specifications. There's W1 through W7 that are used for tank cars. Corrosive cars are W3 or W5s. So here's another picture, DOT 117, just looking at the whole car. And the side spec. So again, just looking at the J versus the R for retrofit. So we're going to make you guys tank car experts tonight in a sense. Nah, not planning to do that. Again, here's the retrofit DOT 117R full scale picture. And then over on the side there, if you look hard, you can see DOT 117R in the specification. So here's another one. It's a retrofit car, and you can see on the placard there, I wrote it on the side there, it's UN 1230, which is methanol, has a flash point of 52 degrees, so it's below the 141 in transportation, making it inflammable liquid versus a combustible liquid, so it's in the right tank car for transportation. Now, these same cars are used in the intermodal, or not intermodal, in unit trains. And you can see the cars here coming along. This is a picture I shot of a train out in Vancouver, Washington back in May when I was out to teach in Pasco, Washington at the NMRA convention that was out there for the Northwest region. But again, these are all DOT 117s or 117Rs because that's what they have to be in unit trains. And the picture to the left, you can see the power and then the one car as a spacer between there to give them some protection between the crew and the product. So here's an example of a unit train on a model railroad from this summer. And so we have the spacer car there, covered hopper, and then you can see a whole line of tank cars behind that. Nice looking train, except for one thing. Those are all DOT 111 CPC 1232s. It's hard to see it, but there's half a head shield on those cars. So this was a great model, but it's not current for 2025 unless they're hauling something other than flammable liquids. If they're hauling corn syrup or some other chemical, that would be okay. But for hauling flammable liquids with a flash point below 141 degrees, these would be wrong. That's okay. But again, I'm trying to help you do it correctly. So these are DOT 111 CPC 1232, and you can tell that from the half head shield on the train cars. So again, anytime we're moving liquids, this is going to become important in today's world. So here's just a picture of a DOT 120, just so you can say you've seen a picture of it. I have not seen one for real. A friend of mine gave me these pictures from out in Montana. Most of the DOT 120s get filled in North Dakota, and they move across the U.S. West to where they can come down through Washington, Oregon, and California because the environmental rules are so strong out there. So I probably won't see one in Michigan unless it's by chance, but chance to do it. So let's think about industries a second. So here's a nice looking industry. It's a company, and you can see a series of tank cars there. So the question becomes, what era are these cars? Is this 2025 or is this something era before? And this is obviously an older era tank car. So again, you can do kind of what you want back in the older eras. The only real rules were coming along from the Bureau of Explosives and DOT that meet that, but it would not be prototypical for correct today. So again, here's another liquid situation, and depending on what they're hauling, you can make rules for 1960 or 1975 or 1985. But if we're in 2025, these would have to be DOT 117s or 117Rs to be hauling flammable liquids. So air becomes important. So when we look at these cars and we look at the era, what era are they in? Well, you can see they all have a housing there above the tank where the expansion of vapors went, and the expansion housing or expansion dome. So these would not be current tank cars, and you can kind of do what you want with them, but based on DOT and BOE requirements from years ago. So take a look at your own industries. What are they doing? What are they moving? What kind of products are they doing? And over on the left there, that's all corn syrup at ADM out in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, when I lived out there as the county emergency manager. On the right here, this is a factory in Holland, Michigan that puts aerosol in spray paints and things like that. They use a lot of flammable liquids to clean on the floor and clean out piping that has spray paints in it. And so again, those would have to now be DOT 117s or 117Rs for the coming into this plant. So there's more than just adding a placard to a car today to make it in the rules for 2025. And as we look at that, I have seen mistakes. So here's a car I photographed a year ago, and this is 1230, so it's methanol. If you could read up on the side there, it's a DOT 111A, so it has shelf couplers. There's no head shields, so it does not meet the rules for moving products under the FAST Act in the United States. So hopefully it got changed out or got fixed, whatever, before they moved it across the country, because that would be a violation right there. So here's another one, DOT 111A. And again, based on what year this picture was taken, it's moving a 1992 flammable liquid. So there's a 3 on that placard to indicate the product. And that would not be a good situation. So again, another violation. And there you can see also the W3, so a little different design. So as we've looked through this stuff fairly quickly here, these are kinds of things you can look for when you're watching trains crossings in front of you. Certainly something to do. I want you to spend more time looking at the end of the car where the specifications are. Now, this is a DOT 112J 340W. So DOT 112 is a pressure car. And the J says, hey, it's got shelf couplers, it's got full head shields, it's got insulation wrapped underneath that jacket for fire impingement and protection there. And then 340 is the tank test pressure. And then if you go down into the specs, the pressure relief device is going to open at 280.5. Usually it's about 3/4 of the tank test pressure. So there again are our R and our J's. We talked about that. Oops. So in the last slide here, so what company is making DOT 117, 117R, and 117P for model railroaders? And the interesting thing is nobody is right now. There is no manufacturer that's making these kind of cars. After they made the DOT 111 CPC 1232s, they thought they were good and didn't have to do anything from there. So at the current time, there's nobody doing that. I had a chat with 2 different vendors at the Novi Train Show, and one of them is working with me right now to maybe produce one. And the issue was getting the drawings for making the molds and things like that. They think they may have a source of those now from the manufacturer, but everybody else I've talked to said, oh, they're not interested. Model railroaders aren't going to really care, Rich. You're the only one who really cares about modeling correctly in the 2025 and beyond. But if you're just joining the hobby and you want to model what you see out there on the train tracks, you need to have cars from 2025 and beyond. We'll see what happens. But currently, there is no model maker that's making any of these new 117 cars or the 120 cars at this point. So it's a problem, I believe, and I've taken it up with the manufacturers. Hopefully, the one will come out soon in the next year with the cars to help out. And again, lots of flammable products can be transported in your DOT 111 and CPC 1232 cars. You just can't do flammable liquids now, but you can go back before and work with that. So that kind of brings me to the end of the presentation, and I'm looking for any questions, discussions. Thanks for listening, and hopefully you've gotten some new information. I know I went fast, but we've got just a short time, and there is no test and that kind of thing. So
Thanks, Richard. Got a couple questions, and so that book that you referenced, the emergency guidebook, is that available for anybody that?
Yes, it's no secrets. So you can buy that. I buy it from Label Master, is the company that I buy mine from. You can also download it off the internet, and on my phone, you can download it into your phone for free also. There's no secrets tied to that book. So buy it from Label Master. There's other companies that would, you can look on the internet that sell it, but you can also download it if you want, or look at it on the internet, or you can download it for free to your phone. I have it on my phone as well as I have hard copies.
Okay, cool. The materials, the hazardous materials that are transported in the cars, once they're loaded with that, like, say alcohol or something flammable, do those cars ever get loaded with something else, or are they always dedicated for that type of material?
That's a yes answer to both. Many tank cars are in designated services, and they don't change products and stuff like that. Other tank cars, it makes a load someplace, and then it's taken somewhere where it's cleaned out, steam cleaned, and all the stuff, so something else can be put in it. In pressure cars, it's very common for pressure cars in the spring to be moving anhydrous ammonia to the farm fields, and then in the summer they're changed over and they move propane to feed places where it's going to be cold, so you can use it for heating. So again, you have to look at compatibility of the valving and gaskets and things like that. But those are interchanged on a regular basis between anhydrous ammonia and LP gas with the product. But we used to have I worked at the Michigan State Police Hazmat Training Center. We had an old sugar car that was up there that was donated to us to use for hazmat training. And that sugar car used to take sugar, liquid sugar, down to Baltimore from Bay City, Saginaw, Michigan area. And then down there, they would put a corrosive product in it, which would eat up the sugar and clean it out on the trip back to Michigan.
Wow. It's pretty ingenious, being able to clean that out that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I had another question in mind. Oh, so these cars, that with this new rule that came out, and all these cars that are now, I guess, would say, can't be a moving violation. Would the owner of the car be able to upgrade that car, or would they have to move that car to could they downgrade it to a different type of product and then buy new cars that fit the regulation rules?
Well, sort of all the above. If you've got a commodity that doesn't fall under the flammable liquid standards, you can transport it in any of the cars. You know, that's okay unless it gets into the new rules that are going to come in 2029 for things that are flammable. So you can put a variety of different products in it. But as you look at what do I need to do, you're going to have to upgrade. Now, who does the upgrade? There are some companies who own their own tank cars, but most tank cars are leased from big tank car manufacturing companies. Dow Chemical used to have its own fleet. They just sold their fleet off to somebody else, and now they lease the cars as a money saving situation because they've got financial issues. But most cases, you're going to manufacturers who own the cars will decide, hey, I want the business for the flammable liquid, so I'm going to upgrade to the DOT 117 specifications versus having the 111s. But you might have a product that is a high flash point liquid. It can go in the older cars, or you could switch over and look at making corrosive cars or other kinds of cars out of those 111s by upgrading them, putting in a lining inside the car and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things you can do. It's just a question of what do you want to do and who's going to pay for it. You know, the paying part is always the thing. But most tank cars are owned by leasing companies and are leased to you, and leased to the users or using it. Some companies, I'm trying to think of Hooker Chemical has a lot of their own cars. Um, the ones that are blue, Celanese has a lot of their own cars and stuff like that. But
For us modelers, since there isn't a model available, how easy would it be to take a model off the shelf and modify it to model these newer cars?
well, you'd have to look at the regular DOT 111s is a tank. That is the tank that's actually holding the product. And then when we go to 117, we're adding a jacket to that car, which has insulation underneath it for fire impingement. And you have different sets of valves and fittings up in the housing on top, and an improved bottom outlet there with skid protection, so it doesn't, when it derails it, you don't break off that valve at the bottom. So there's some things you have to do that. And more than likely, the jacketing thing probably would not show up to most modelers. They would just see the tank, and the DOT specs with the R would say that, hey, it's been, or the J, it's been, that's the only thing you need to do, because it's probably impossible to add a true jacket to a regular tank car model. But the valving up on the top there, the housing's different on the old tank cars to the new tank cars. There's just the one manway, and then the jacket or the housing up there, which has the valves for liquids and vapors and things like that. So you could do it and simulate and pretend, but I just soon had the modeler or the manufacturers come up. There was one nameless company I'll mention back in Kansas City who told me that they come out with a car, and I bought a copy of the car, and it said R on the end of the box, DOT 111R. But when you took the car out of the box, it had DOT 111 on it. And I went back and talked to them later about it at the convention, and they said, Rich, you're the only one in America who would see that and recognize it. The rest of the people don't care. And I said, well, we ought to do at least correct and right. Well, yeah, but it's only you that cares. And I said, no, I got other friends who care too, but so I was really disappointed with the response that I got from the manufacturer, the nameless manufacturer.
The let's see, does the length of the car have anything to do with the role and the safety of it?
Only in capacity. In other words, there are DOT 111 tank cars that are all different lengths and sizes and capacities. So that's really up to the shipper. If you're going to send we'll use the term 1,000 gallons. I can put 1,000 gallons in any kind of a tank car, one that just holds up to 1,000, or it might hold 20,000, and we just put 1,000 in. What do I need as a manufacturer to ship and move and stuff like that? So you could even have a company that says, okay, we want to move 5,000 gallons, and they send you to your plant a 2-compartment tank. Well, each compartment will hold 2,500 gallons, so it doesn't really matter. You just needed to move 5,000. That's the only tank I had available close to you, and so I'll send that to you to fill up, and then we'll transport it.
Is there any regulations on how much liquid can be moved, like of
Yes.
each type with the car?
Yeah, that's designed in the specifications. There's a maximum you can do.
Okay, you got to allow for expansion and I guess
Yep.
things like that,
Yep.
and probably
We've
weight.
when you fill these tank cars, you fill it shelf full, and there's a so many inches of outage that you have to have in the car based on what the product is and where it's going. So if you're filling, let's say, pressure cars in Alberta, Canada, in December or January, and you're shipping it to Mexico, you're going to need to leave space because as it moves from Canada to across the U.S. to Mexico, the temperature is going to go up, which means the product's going to expand. And so you have to build that all into the fillage thing. So the guys up in Canada filling them, or women up in Canada filling them, are going, God, it's only 3/4 full. This is crazy. But when it gets to Mexico with the expansion, it's now 100% full.
Right. Yeah. When you're blocking a train out, building a manifest, is
Mm-hmm.
there regulations on how many cars can be in a block at a time before you have a spacer car?
Well,
And
there's no spacer cars that I know of that are used in just a typical train, but there is the new rules with the high hazard flammable trains that spell out when does it become a high hazard, how many full tank cars do you have to have, and things like that in there. The spacing is on the crew or on the unit trains where we add one or two covered hoppers between the power and the tank cars. If you're going to just regular trains, you got to have at least five cars between the power and the first tank car that's full of hazardous materials. If it's a tank car that's filled with what we call it empty, but it's really not empty. It has a certain amount of product. You can have up to 3% product still in the tank car. The railroad paperwork says it's empty. That's not empty. Stuff as a firefighter type person, the LP gas car that's listed as empty may have as much as 1,000 gallons of LP gas still in the bottom of it, which is two of those tanks that are behind your house. That's not empty to me, and I understand what can happen when that gets heated up and things like that. So we have them. We're considered residue cars. That has the small amount still left in it, but it has the black cards, and you can drop that back to less distance between the power compared to a full engine. So a lot of the Bureau of Explosive rules on separation between products came out in about 1900. What you could put in, and it started with explosives. What can you put next to an explosives car, and then poison gases and flammables, liquids, and various things like that. So there is some rules out there on where cars are placed and what's placed next to each other and things like that under the federal government's rules. And but most of the things are tied to how many cars are between the power and the first tank car that's full of hazardous materials. Now, if it's a tank car full of milk, put it wherever you want in the train. If it's a tank car of propane, then it's going to be 5 spacer cars. If it's a residue car, meaning it has a small amount still in the bottom, it can be a little closer to the power. But to us as emergency responders, a car full of vapors is pretty dangerous as compared to a car that's full of product. It's where we get into this thing called a BLEVE, a boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion, or as we like to teach it, a blast leveling everything very evenly. Yeah.
has there been any accident due to car design, or they've all been equipment failures or track failures?
Yes, all of the cars that failed in the last few years obviously came off the track for some reason. It may have been a mechanical failure on the car, or it may have been a track breakage, something like that. But once those cars get off the track and get on the ground, you can scrape the bottom outlet off. Now you got product running out. You can damage the top. Once you get it into a fire and fire's impinging on the tank itself, again they can actually come open at the welds or the seams, and you've got a flammable situation occurring there where all the product now is on fire. In the case of the pressure cars, again, we puncture those and you've got a gas situation. And there's a lot of higher pressure fittings, so that the tank will vent before it blows up. And there is a vent on the smaller tank cars, the liquid ones, but we tend to see cuts into the side of the jacket from things. Could be from a coupler, it could be from rail, it could be from a lot of things that would scrape open the side of the car. and exposed to the liquid so it can pour out or be exposed. And again, the liquid doesn't burn; it's only the vapors that are exploding, or only the vapors that are on fire. So as you expose liquid and it can vaporize from heat of the fire, whatever, you're going to get a bigger fire. And then the tank cars have failed over the years also,
Right.
as you saw up in the Canada's pictures.
Hmm. Are there hazardous routes that railroads have to observe when moving these hazardous loads?
Yes, that's part of the new Fast Act and stuff that they don't want the trains going through downtown if they've got all these flammable products. They want the routes that are going around town, just like that. So if you go to the various railroads websites, you can look up what are their key routes. Key meaning these are for hazardous materials. These are the routes that those trains take, and they call them a key route.
Okay.
Key.
Hmm. Got two more questions, and
Okay.
got or time for two more. So, the requirements for the yellow reflective strips, is there like a certain length that they need to be, or quantity per car, or
Yeah, that's just like trucks. A number of years ago, the folks came out of Washington and said you got to have those vertical stripes so that when people are sitting at a crossing or driving up to a crossing and trains going across with black tank cars, that reflection is there for safety reasons to hopefully prevent you from crashing into the train, although it does happen occasionally. Or and the same thing is true of trucks. So you'd have to go to the specifications from the federal government for what those are.
Hmm, okay. And the last question that we got time for is Speed wants to know: are you going to model modern day trains with this
Well,
information that we're getting?
well, actually, that's a yes and a no question. My answer for the am I modeling it? No, I'm modeling 1959 if I ever get it done and working on it. So I will be under the older rules uh, and my Great Northern layout from uh, the Washington back to the Midwest. I do have a model railroad derailment that's 34 cars, HO scale, that I take out to do train emergency responders, and we set it down on a table, and they walk in and go, "Here's your derailment," and they go, "Wow," and they go, "Let's walk around the table and see the other side." No, you can't walk around the table. It's a mile long train, so you're gonna have to work from one side, or you're gonna have to select people to work from the other side and divide it up under your incident command system and geographical things like that. And then I go, well, can I get one of those pieces of paper that show what's on board the train? And my answer to that is yes, if you can tell me what it's called, I'll be happy to give you one. And stuff like that. But actually, my friend Ed Chapman, when he was head of hazardous materials for BNSF, took all the cars that I had did in the derailment and he typed it up in the BNSF format and from front of the train to the back of the train. There's only one railroad that runs for lists their cars and their paperwork, their consists from the back to the front, and that's Union Pacific. Everybody else does it from the front to the back. So we had it all typed up, and I've got that out. And so if you can tell me what it's called, I'd be happy to give you one of those. And I've got enough stuff for you to work on that in the next 3 hours. These are the things I need as if you were at a real derailment, a drawing. I need to take a look at the chemicals, which is the most worst chemical. I need you to take, once the fire burns out, I want you to tell me which cars based on silhouette are DOT 111s, 105s, and 112s that are in the derailment pile and all those things. So it takes, like I said, about 4 hours to work the first day of the derailment.
Hmm.
And we have leaking cars there, and that's orange, so that means it's a hydrocarbon car because the alcohols burn clear during the day and blue at night. It's hard to recreate, and that type of thing. And I have white for anhydrous ammonia releases, black smoke for hydrocarbon releases.
Well, thanks, Rich. We're kind of coming close to our time, and that I wanted to ask you about how you deal with these responses. So maybe that might be another clinic that you could present for us. But thanks for coming on and presenting this information for us.
Okay, well, hopefully everybody got a little bit out of it. I know there was a lot of detailed information at the beginning. Just kind of, you need to have a background to start with. It makes the end of it look better and why we're doing what we're doing. And again, need to put the pressure on the manufacturers to come up with DOT 117 cars and the DOT 120 cars, so you can have modern stuff on your layout as of 2025 and beyond.
See you
Bye-bye.
later.
Thanks a lot.
Hi, I'm Michelle Kempema, and I'm with the Rocky Mountain Region NMRA. And today we celebrated tomorrow's NMRA 90th birthday down in Denver with all of the kind of local divisions getting together for a picnic. And I just got back in time to host this hour. So you've got me as a host. And so this is a great time to celebrate the NMRA. And tomorrow we're going to have a big old happy birthday for them online, I'm sure. But let's get down to why we're here for NMRAx. So 3D printing has changed the hobby, offering many unique items that only a few years ago wouldn't have been possible. However, in many cases, the parts require some cleanup and paint, as well as some weathering to make the model part a complete scene. This evening, we have the owner of Yelton Models, a 3D manufacturer who's been providing models for our hobby. And he's going to take you through the steps to give you a finished model using simple tools and techniques. Tonight's project is a 1929 Rumley tractor. So please welcome to show us how to do all this, Dan Notley. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for coming and doing this. So
Excellent.
we'll let you get going.
Okie dokie. So this evening, I just wanted to talk to you folks. I get the chance to go to a lot of different train shows these days. I get to travel with Spring Creek Model Trains, and I'm constantly getting feedback from people as to the products that I manufacture. So this little tractor is one of the things that I make, and a lot of times people have asked me about what do you do to make it look like the picture on the box. So I thought this wouldn't be a bad little discussion to have this evening, and kind of get going on that. So this is what we're heading for. This is a 1929 Rumley tractor, and like I say, as it comes to you, it's going to be gray, and it's going to have all kinds of supports on it, and we do that to help with the shipping and all the rest. Unfortunately, it does require a bit of work to get it cleaned up. So getting the tools that you need is a good starting point. So this is pictures of two of the types of little scissors that I like to use. And pretty much every train show I go to, there's a chap that sells tools. And if you rummage through his pile, you'll find these little scissors. They're a cheap knockoff, if you will, of a dental scissor. So they cut very fine and very close, and they come in either curved or straight. And what they're really good for is getting in there to remove the connection points of a 3D print. And I'll show you a picture of those in a second. But they're great little things. They've got, they're spring loaded, and like I say, you can get right tight in there. And if those that haven't done 3D prints before or worked with 3D prints, a lot of the times as a manufacturer, we want to keep the thing as safe as possible during transit. So we have to leave a whole lot of things on to help support it. Now, the thing is, when you get the model, you really should take your time and inspect it. Make sure that you can see what the end product is before you want to start cutting away at things. In my case, I tend to recommend to people, have a look at the pictures on the website, or have a look at pictures of the actual item. Get an idea as to where you should be putting your scissors before you do it. And realistically, it is a pair of scissors or like a sprue cutter or something like that, not too bad. I know with the things that I manufacture, I tend to make the connection points as small as possible so you don't get a lot of dimpling, and a little bit of sanding may be required, but for the most part, it's pretty clean. And like I say, don't rush through this thing, because we take the time to put a lot of details into this, and it's really easy to make a mistake and cut them off. So here's how the product would come. And if you have a quick look at it, you can kind of see the tractor in there, but you can also see that those supports are kind of interweaved amongst the spokes and any of the smaller piping and things like that. So it's really worth just taking a few moments and, going over the thing, and don't rush through it. It's meant to be a bit of a challenge. It's meant to be a hobby. It's meant to be enjoyed. So, nobody gets a victory for tearing it apart quick. And although you may think that you can just take your fingers and break these things off, you can in some instances. But if you look at some of the fine details on this, like I say, around the wheels and all the steam pipes and things like that on this little tractor, you can see where the support kind of comes to a small little ball at the end. And that gives you a perfect spot where you can nestle those scissors in there and do a little snip. and that'll take it off nice and clean. And like I say, just don't rush it. You'll be much happier with yourself if you do. So here's another view of it. And those supports, like you see, they get all the way up into the small steering wheel. Things like that, that without those supports, it just would be impossible to print. And also, if I cut them off for you, the thing would get horribly damaged in shipping, unfortunately. So I kind of have to leave those on so that you get a nice product at the end of the day. So you gradually start taking things away. And as you do, you start to see more and more of the tractor. Now, sometimes, depending on the part that you're working on, it's not a bad idea to kind of stop at one point and consider putting a base coat of paint on it if you need be. And other times it's definitely worth considering removing all of the supports before you start any kind of final painting. It's kind of model to model as far as that one goes. This particular tractor, I think pretty much I just removed all the supports, cleaned it up, and then went about starting the painting process. And you can see little nubs and bits that are still left on there. That requires going back in, again, with those fine scissors, taking them off. Using different sanding tools and things like that can be very helpful to you. Even just a number 11 blade to kind of scrape along the areas is also a way of dealing with it. You just want to support the area with your hand. Don't just kind of push the blade hard at it as far as that goes. Okay. Now I say more and more of the tractor gets seen as you remove these things. And like I say, we took time to put a lot of detail into this. This photo is not the best one I could have done, but it does kind of show all the detail within the wheels and all the rest. So there we have it kind of cleaned up. Most of the support mechanism is off. There's a few little bumps and stuff along the bottom, and we can sand those out later to get that all nice and cleaned up. And at this point, too, you need to realize that what do you want this thing to look like at the end of the day? Do you want it to look like it's a brand new tractor? Is it something that's going to be sitting out in the weeds, covered in rust? All these things kind of affect some of the choices you make going forward as far as what paint you're going to use and what weathering techniques you're going to use as well. And you could go on for hours about all those. I'm going to talk a little bit about them tonight. Like I say, we put a fair bit of detail into this little tractor, so you want to take the time just to cut it off. So a little bit of light sanding here and there cleans up those little bumpy spots. And then you want to consider, okay, how am I going to paint this thing? For myself, I use popsicle sticks. I use, like here, this picture shows a little piece of cardboard kind of bent. And I put a piece of double-sided tape on it. And I try to put it in a spot where it's either not going to be seen afterwards, or it's something I could easily brush paint out to kind of hide that paint if you did actually have to flip the tractor over to have a look at it. Give yourself enough room that you can hold on to it, and make sure that it's adhered well enough so that you can turn it in all directions. So that you can, support this thing as you go about the painting. So now the paint. Here's something that I tend to use. Vallejo makes a whole line of paints and washes that I'm really quite happy with. The Vallejo Air products are pretty much good to go right out of the bottle. You can spray that about 30 pounds of pressure from an airbrush, or they brush paint really well also. Also, the washes that they do, the rust effects and mud effects and streaking effects that they make are great products as well. The other thing with the painting, though, is you need to have a little bit of an artist's eye about what colors to choose. And like I say, refer back to those photos. Have a look, see what you want it to look like, and make the decision slowly and move even slower when you go to do it. And the end results turn out pretty good at the end of the day. And the other thing, too, I wanted to mention, the stuff that I produce, I tend to wash it twice in IPA to make sure any of the additional resin has been taken off. Never is a bad idea to wash a product again in rubbing alcohol. Just in case your own hands have left some kind of oil residue on it, or if there's other bits and pieces that maybe weren't caught in the initial washes that the product's been given. And that's pretty much true, I think, of all 3D prints that you deal with, if it's a resin print. If it's an FDM print, then that's something you really don't want to do at that point. It's unnecessary. You could get away with just simple cold, warm, soapy water sort of thing. You don't want to use really hot water on FDM prints. But if it's resin, IPA is your best friend as far as that goes. And also, I go with the Vallejo paints only because, I mean, they're acrylic based, so they're low order, they're really easy to clean up. Just a simple rattle can paint works perfectly fine for this stuff too. And the other question I get asked a lot of times is, do you have to prime the stuff? Well, the truth is you don't. If it's a color you're going to be painting, the only two that I found that I really consider, or maybe three, would be if it wants to be a white piece, then I tend to prime everything white at that point. It helps make that color show more cleanly. Yellow and red are also two colors I would recommend priming with white, because you're looking at, as you can see from the previous photos, it's basically a gray resin, and that's kind of a common color for a lot of manufacturers. I also know that some people use a blue tone to the resins that they print. In that instance, I would recommend probably just priming those products. Blue, again, gives you that shade underneath, and it's going to bleed through in some capacity. So you don't really want to put heavy coats of paint on these things because there's a lot of really fine detail there. So, again, light coats do a much better job of it. This is something new for me. Not an airbrush, but this type of airbrush. I just purchased this in the last week or so. I kind of snuck the slide in last minute. This airbrush doesn't mix the paint in the brush itself. What it does is you pre-mix the paint, put it in the bottle, and then at the nozzle there, so this small tip from the actual paint bottle, it draws the paint up, atomizes it in the air, and you spray it. So the cool thing about this, at least I thought was pretty cool, you don't have to take the brush apart to wash it afterwards. The brush is basically washless. You never have to disassemble this thing. The only thing you do have to, kind of maintain is the viscosity of the paint. It's sprayable. It's got to be thin. So what I found with the Vallejo paints, I thin them about 30%, and I get really good coverage with that. And the nozzle there that you see sticking out just below the small little metal pin, basically, it sticks out. That's got a 0.05 millimeter hole in it. So it atomizes the paint very fine. There's also additional nozzle tips you can get, which are 0.03 millimeters. So it's a smaller spraying diameter as far as that goes. And you don't have the control with this brush like you do with a dual action brush, but you do have a fair bit of control with it. And for the most part, what I found, the models that I paint, for instance, I tend to be one or two colors with a little bit of masking, or one color and then a lot of brush painting afterwards. Quite often I paint figures, and generally I put some kind of flesh tone on it and then sit there picking the clothes out with brush paints afterwards. But I thought I'd share this picture of this airbrush. It's a company called Decoding, and it's fairly new to the market. They also make a small motorized sanding tool that I've found to be quite useful as well. Not that I want to randomly plug another company here, but I've been very pleased with these two products in the last little bit. And like I say, the fact that you don't got to worry about tearing the brush apart and cleaning it. Anybody's ever worked with an airbrush before, I think you know what I'm talking about. It's time consuming, and if for some reason you don't quite put the parts back together right, the brush just never sprays the same. This one, I've changed colors a dozen times or so, and honestly, it's just been fantastic. So thought I'd share. Like I say, light coat's the best way to go. In this instance, I took a little bit of dark olive and a little bit of white just to kind of get me close to a color that I was happy with. I mean, just an overspray, just to cover all the nooks and crannies, because you're going to spend time basically repainting all the surfaces as you try to weather it and bring it forward. So again, color, that's a real personal thing, right? You can, again, use those photos and find something that's close to what you like. The nice thing, again, with the Vallejo paints is they have a very large spectrum of colors to choose from. So a lot of the times you don't have to blend your own colors. I've been painting for a fair time, so I tend to use my eyes and make decisions that make me happy. I'm usually pretty good with how it comes out. So you get the small little tractor, you got the color on, you start to really see the details pop, and then you start having ideas to, what you're going to do as far as your next paint applications go. You'll notice too that I've left a couple of little supports in place on the steering wheel there. Again, during this stage is a good idea to do so, just to try not to damage this thing while you're working on it. So here's a picture of the actual, right? or one of the pictures that I used to kind of inspire me as to how I was going to make this thing happen. You can see that, it's in pretty good condition. The drive wheels are showing a little bit of wear because, they're in contact with the wet ground and whatnot, so they're not pristine in this instance. But the actual machinery itself looks to be pretty well kept. And you can see these tractors today at different tractor fests and, different pull events and things like that. And they can look as, brand new as possible. However, you can also find these things, in the back of somebody's field completely rusted out. So I kind of like this one because it really does work for pretty much any era as far as modeling goes. And I think, it lends itself to a whole lot of different applications as far as that goes. Here's yet another one. Again, colors, it's a much darker color. The wheels are, again, in this instance, a bright red. You'll see, if you go start looking for photos of these things, you will find so many different possible paint schemes. And some of them are manufacturer accurate and others are a little bit of modeler's license, if you will, on the actual owner of the tractor. They've embellished them to try to make them stand out at a tractor show or whatnot. And in this instance too, they're trying to show it as it was brand new. So as modelers, we tend to dirty things up a little bit. So I start to pick out some colors, add that touch here and there, start to clean the thing up, start to draw the eye in. And again, taking cues from the photographs, right? You can try to find the exact thing and try to model it specific, and that's perfectly fine. You also might drive yourself a bit crazy trying to do that too. So, take a happy medium, be good with it. And like I say, the colors that I chose in this case, I went with the red wheels, little accents here and there on some of the pipes with some of the rusty washes and whatnot. And more and more of that support mechanism that was kind of there, clean that up and sanded it down a little bit here and there as you kind of see it. And just take your time, have some fun with it as far as that goes. So then, there's also the rust and the grime washes that you can use. Use them sparingly. They'll give you that effect that you're looking for. And they also help to bring out those small details and things like that are part of these models. And like I say, we spend a lot of time in front of a computer trying to draw tiny little rivets for people to see and enjoy. And we hope you do. I think you do, as far as that goes. And use a bit of metallics on things like the pulleys and the flywheel and stuff like that. And there's a myriad of different types that you can use for this. The control levers, things like that. Just add that touch of color so they pop. In a lot of cases, one of these things you see brand new, they go to a lot of trouble to paint everything one color completely. So it's really hard to pick this thing out. As a modeler, you like to say the little foot lever and even a bit of detail on the steering wheel and stuff like that. It's worth, kind of adding to it as far as you go. And pick out bits and pieces. Let the weathering start to show a little bit. If you look closely at the front of this thing, Rumley's actually embossed in it as per the prototype. And so on something that it's HO scale, after all, that's pretty small writing, and it shows up nice and clean as far as that goes. And then there's little bits of brass highlights and things like that I also picked out as far as that went for this little tractor. The only thing is when you're painting something is you need to have the assorted paints around you. Yes, you can, start with basic colors and blend paints, but it is a lot more efficient and a lot easier if you just kind of knuckle down. And I find every time I go to a hobby shop, I tend to pick up another couple of colors and add to my repertoire as far as that goes. It just makes the actual decisions a lot easier as you go to do these things. Again, a little bit more pops as it goes. You're trying to get this thing to the point where you're pretty happy with the end results. So here's the neat thing. A lot of times I get asked, do you produce decals for these things, or where can I get decals for it? And sometimes they're available, commercially as far as that goes, or you can, pay a manufacturer to, produce a custom set for you. Something that I like to do is, it's an old George Selio's trick where you take a printed thing and sand the paper. So if you got a decent color printer, so there's a picture of the artwork that I used for part of this tractor. scale it, print it, and then take some really fine sandpaper and sand it a little bit thinner so that it'll lay down on the model. For the most part, this works pretty good, and it's relatively inexpensive as far as that goes too. Again, most people I think in the hobby that have a computer probably have some kind of a printer that'll give them a reasonable quality thing. You may have to mess around with the resizing a couple of times. I tend to, look at the model, take some measurements, and then scale many different ones and then see which one kind of fits the best. So I'll get, something will come onto my printer with, 15 different little signs all in a row sort of thing showing me, okay, this is kind of neat, kind of like that. Then I can pick the one that suits me best. And sometimes, again, when you're dealing with something that's really small like this, going with a slightly larger sign just so it's a little bit easier to read and understand might not be such a bad idea either. Now, of course, you can also contact a manufacturer and have custom decals made if you want to go that route. Definitely nothing wrong with that. It's just I find it very expensive. So at the end of the day, there's my little oil pull signage on there. And I think I've got another slide coming up that's going to show you the back half of the tractor too. A little bit of wash over it helps kind of blend it in too. It's by no means perfect, but it's not a bad looking product at the end of the day. And then again, a couple of the oil pull signs on the back. I didn't quite get the edge cut too well on that one though. I'm gonna do it better next time. But it will suit my needs for this one. And this, like I said, this is an HO tractor. And I think, you can spend an evening and start with the base product, with the supports on it and just kind of work your way through it. Not a bad idea to put your base color on maybe the first night, walk away from it, give some thought to it, do some research, and then come back at it and go through the rest of the painting as far as that goes. And you can spend a lot of time weathering these things up and detailing them up, as you might guess. So there's pretty much our end result on this little thing. And it's a good evening's work. So here we are. Hopefully we're going to see Michelle.
Okay. That was really interesting, Dan. Sorry, I was typing up a question. So
That's okay.
we've had a few come in, but I typed some that I had too. That was really interesting because I've been trying to paint more things. So,
Okay.
but I think I'll go with one that was asked first because it's kind of like way back at the beginning.
Sure.
He says, "What resin works best for you?" Excuse me, water washable or standard? And I don't understand the question either.
Okay, so that's fair enough. There's a few different types of resin that are available. And some of them are water washable. And I worked with water washable fairly early on in my own processes. I'm happier with a standard resin at the end of the day. The products tend to turn out much crisper. Not to say that water washable may have improved their current mixes. What it comes down to is the whole cleaning.
Right.
Standard resin, you end up having to use isopropyl alcohol to clean it, where water washable, you can use soap and water to clean
Okay.
them afterwards, right?
But what happens if you use soap and water on a standard that you're supposed to use alcohol or vice versa?
Well,
is there a problem?
if you use alcohol on a water washable, it's not going to cause you any real problems, and it's not going to hurt the product. If you use soap and water on a standard resin, it won't be able to dissolve the uncured resin. It's not capable of dealing with that.
Only during like right after the curing process, right? Like after I buy it off the shelf, do I need to wash it only in alcohol, or I could use water?
If you buy it off the shelf from a manufacturer, you could definitely just use IPA. That's never going to hurt it. It doesn't matter what the makeup of the thing is at that point. Okay. If you have concerns, you can wash it in IPA, and you can wash it in soapy water afterwards. But again, it's not necessary as far as that goes. Now, there are other resin cleaning products that are out there that you can use. I know Elegoo's got one, and a couple other manufacturers make like a resin prep type material that's designed for washing. They can be a little bit costly on their own, and isopropyl alcohol is readily available from drugstores or many different sources as far as that goes, and a higher percentage alcohol tends to do a better job.
Okay.
Okay.
I've always just washed it in soapy water because I was told that forever
Yeah,
ago.
you're
So,
not hurting it by any stretch of imagination, but if there was
okay.
any uncured resin somewhere on the product, and hopefully there isn't, it really wouldn't affect it, neither positive or negative. Like, you're not going to get any kind of a misshaped by it as far as.
Okay. Well, that answers kind of the second question
Sure.
that we had, which was about washing and cleaning them. So yeah, so you answered those questions. The next one is back to your airbrush.
Mhm.
It looks like it's low maintenance. Do you only have to clean the part the paint is in?
Yeah, that's it. I can back the slide up to put it back up, or where we're seeing each other's man. So the way it works basically is the air is funneled out at a given pressure.
Okay.
And if you take a straw and you blow across the top of it, you can kind of draw water up out of the glass, and you play when you're a kid.
So it's the same.
It's the same kind of process where that
Okay.
water or air going across basically the top of a small tube causes a Venturi effect, which pulls the paint up. And the bottle's been designed in such a way that it pressurizes the bottle at the same time, so you get a constant flow of paint. It's a pretty neat bit of kit.
Interesting.
The way it
Yeah.
works out. And it's not crazy expensive either. I think I ordered it with the brush and 4 bottles and 50 of the smaller tips and 50 of the 0.5 tips, and it was under $100 Canadian. So I think it's like 60 USD sort of thing. So,
You can buy multiple of the bottles. Can you cap them off and keep your paint mix?
yeah, they come. I guess you'd see this. Where are you?
Okay, so you can cap your paint mix and then do a different mix, and then I could
And
see.
you have multiple bottles. Like right now, I'm actually experimenting with it. I have 2 bottles sitting on my workbench, and I
Okay.
put paint in them. So I want to see how well it seals, because I think it's sealed up pretty good. It looks pretty good to me, and I've been playing around with them a little bit. And I've got a wash that I put together for doing figures. So it's got some of the Vallejo flesh tone in it, but I also have a flesh wash that I put into, which is slightly darker tone, which I'm happy with.
Okay.
I set that aside, and it's been in the bottle for 3 days, and I've sprayed it every other day just to see if I'm having any kind of troubles with it clogging or separating in some goofy way. So far, it's been great. And
So
I
you're
also,
getting your consistent mix color every time.
so the color is the same, and the seal is tight enough so it's not drying out on me. I also have another one with just black in it, right? And
Okay.
it's perfect. There's no separation at all or anything like that, because what I do find with the wash and the paint, they kind of come to higher levels because the wash is a little bit thinner by its very nature, and it doesn't completely mix with the paint, but it sure does atomize well. And ultimately, when I do my figures, the flesh tone, where it kind of sinks into the nooks and crannies, you get a little bit more of a shadow effect too, in kind of a one-shot deal. And I know you've been painting some figures for the museum. And,
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm
so-
super interested in this because I've never used an airbrush because I'm afraid of cleaning it and taking care
Well,
of it.
this is what I just was searching the other day. I came across this thing and I thought, that's cool. So I ordered it. And it was within a week it was here, and super happy with the results so far. And like I say, my paint experiments so far have turned out pretty good. I've had 3 or 4 days of the one mix there, and I know Monday, I guess I'm fine. I'm off work again, so I'll get to play with it again.
So we'll have to have you back to talk to us about that piece of it.
Do just a straight up. This is airbrush is amazing.
So, okay, so I have some more basic questions back from the beginning.
Yep.
So I liked the scissors. I had never seen that kind of snipper before.
Mhm.
What are you sanding it with to get the tiny last bit?
So there's just a little bit like a sanding stick sort of thing is probably the easiest way to do it, and you use a fairly fine one as
Just a
far as
little
that goes.
tiny. Okay.
Yeah, you don't need a very coarse sandpaper. The material is relatively soft, so you can hit it with a 180 or a 220 paper, and you'll get the results you want. You can go a lot finer than that too. And
Okay.
like I say, the company that makes the airbrush that I bought also they manufacture a small little mechanical sanding device, and it's kind of like a motorized sanding stick.
Yeah.
And it has multiple heads on it. I should have included it in the.
It's like a tiny Dremel kind of thing. Like
Kind of, yeah, but it's reciprocating motion back and forward with the
okay.
different shape sanding heads.
Okay.
Right?
Interesting.
Grab it quick.
Okay. Now you have a tractor, and I'm looking at your tractor, and you have this wheel well, and you have this wheel inside it, and you've painted up inside there.
Yep.
So what kind of brush do you use to do that? How do you
Okay, so if you get yourself a brush that has long and bristle, right, and very flexible, almost like
a liner brush, like
I'm trying to think what you relate to. I was going down the automotive world, going to like a pinstriping brush, that kind of thing, where the brushes are very really long, and I guess like for an eyeliner too, the same kind of thing. Is you want to be able to pull off that line. A long flexible bristle is nice to be able to just dampen it, and then you can just draw it around that shape. And if you use a wash, basically flip the thing upside down, start at the top of the curve, and just let the wash kind of
so you're letting it kind of roll underneath there.
Let the filler reaction just kind of draw it around, sort of thing. And it'll do a pretty good job for you. And it's nice and easy to work with. Like I say, the Vallejo washers are already pre-mixed, and they come with grime and all that other fun stuff. So
I just got some of those. I like them.
Yeah, but like I say, it's half the fun I have with what I do, making the products and stuff like that. I get a real giggle of painting the stuff that I make before I put it on the website, right? And generally, I'm happy with my results.
Let me look at YouTube real quick. I don't see any other questions on there. So you got some compliments on great advice. So thank you so much for doing this. You'll have to come back and do a figure painting one.
I definitely will.
So, all right. Well, thank you everyone for watching.